started the recording, and I'll just kick off the meeting with a brief overview of the day, and then we'll follow up with introduction. I want to welcome everybody to the July 17th, 2025 meeting of Seattle Design Commission. Our meetings are recorded on MS Teams for posting on our website at a later date. We have one item here for the commission today from 11 until 12:30. The initial look at proposed upgrades to the Thomas Street corridor of Seattle Center. In a moment, we'll have the presenters introduce themselves. From 12:30 to 1:30, we have a commission business section. And in the afternoon, from 2 until 4, we'll be doing 2 field trips to look at 2 potential station locations at Ballard and Inner Bay for Sound Transit's Ballard Light Rail Extension project. Why don't we go ahead and start with introductions with commissioners and then with the project team. I don't think we're going to be expecting anyone from the public today. We do have an opportunity for individuals to make up to 2 minutes of public comment. So after your presentation, but before commissioner questions, we'll take a check to see if there is anyone, obviously within the room, but also online, that wants to make comment.
Ray Gastel, Planning Commissioner.
Hi, Kate Clark, Art Commissioner.
Zubin Rao, Architecture Commissioner.
Brian Markham, Engineering Commissioner, and 2 disclosures. One, I'm the primary consultant for the Space Needle on one side of your project, and then I'm actually with you guys on the monorail project on the other side of this project. So familiarity is high, and I open it to the table. If there's any conflict with that, please let me know, and I'll step back from voting.
Hi, Siri Messidi, Outlet Commissioner. Valerie Keenest, staff. Winnie Van for staff.
Kevin O'Neill, I'm actually a member of the commission, even though I'm here and though everybody else is here. I don't know how this always happens, but it does. I'm actually the Transportation Planning Commissioner and Chair of the Commission. My disclosure is I spent a number of years working for the Seattle Department of Transportation. I worked on a number of projects that kind of touched this area. I worked on the bicycle master plan and other modal master plans, Climate Pledge Arena, and various other segments of Thomas Street, which then got pulled into the Thomas Street Reimagined project. So I just wanted to disclose that.
Jen Lee with GGN Project Designs.
Julia Levitt with Seattle Center.
Shannon Nickel with GGN Landscape Architect.
And with Booth, GGN.
We'll go ahead and then we'll start with your presentation.
Should I go?
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm here
My
too.
apologies, Phoebe.
It's okay.
Please.
Phoebe Bogert, Landscape Architect Commissioner.
Thank you, Phoebe. We have you till 12:30, and if there's nothing else, why don't we go ahead and start the presentation?
Okay, great. And I advance on the slide then from here? Yeah. Okay,
I
perfect.
can do it too.
Oh, no, I'll do it for mine, it's fine. So good morning, everyone. I'm Julia Levitt. I'm here representing Seattle Center, and I'm joined by Shannon Nickel, who's going to present on behalf of GGN. And we are excited to be in front of you today, sharing Seattle Center's design for a refresh of vacated Thomas Street on the Seattle Center Civic Campus. I will pause and say this is David Kunzelman, also with Seattle Center, Director of Planning and Capital Development. And we will soon be joined by another Seattle Center colleague, Robert Latham. And so back to this. Today we are hoping for approval of our project concept, and we look forward to the dialogue with the commission to help us discuss how to further refine our design. Down. Oh, maybe I'm over in the wrong. There we go. Our presentation has 4 main sections. I will take us through an introduction and the project goals and schedule, and then I'll hand it off to Shannon. She'll talk about the context and she'll talk about the design. And I have a couple of cameos in Shannon's section as well. So I think I just want to start by saying this is a really momentous year for Seattle Center. Memorial Stadium renovation is underway, and it's not renovation, it's redevelopment of Memorial Stadium is underway. I know you are all familiar with that project. It's already starting to transform the campus. We are actively planning for FIFA World Cup fan celebration to take place on campus next summer. That will be, I think, the single largest event that has occurred at Seattle Center since, taken across all the periods of activation, since the World's Fair. And also, I think hot off the press is that this month, Seattle Center is rolling out its 10-year strategic vision and action plan. One of the top goals of that plan is to reinvest in Seattle Center's public spaces. And so one thing that's exciting about this project is it is kind of a first look at what we are thinking about in terms of our public spaces, and hopefully the first of many more to come. We are doing this project because Thomas Street is the busiest pedestrian corridor at Seattle Center. It's the place of arrival for many people when they first step off the monorail or walk in from the parking garage or step off the bus. It may be their first time or their first, point of arrival in Seattle as a whole, if they're coming from the cruise terminal to see the Space Needle. So it is a first impression and a welcome. Because the street is so hardworking, because we stage events and have crowds there year round, it is also showing its age. You can see from this photo, the retail in particular that you can see in this picture needs a refresh. We think it's an opportunity to be more engaging and to really activate the public realm. There are a number of spaces along Thomas Street, which Shannon will talk about, that are opportunities for better placemaking and wayfinding, where people want to gather and show us that they want to linger and see things. And we think we can improve the quality of those spaces. And then finally, this is a unifying project. There are a number of projects underway along the Thomas Street corridor, including the monorail station ADA upgrades and an open RFP solicitation for a new retail partner, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And then some of our partner organizations that have venues that touch Thomas Street are also looking at exterior renovations. So it seemed like a great time to work on Thomas Street. Our vision for Thomas Street is for, I love this first point, a street that looks great, works hard, and lasts long. And I just want to emphasize that when we say works hard and lasts long, we're really talking about flexibility and events. We need to be able to turn this street into a place that's lined with booths, a place that is functional with operations, or a place that just holds people queuing for the monorail or coming to all the daily attractions at Seattle Center. It is a street that helps unify the Seattle Center campus for all the things that happen between 5th Ave North and 2nd Ave North, and really draws you into the campus and keeps you there. And a place that embodies all the things that we think make Seattle Center what it is. It is democratic, inclusive, and welcoming, with opportunities for visitors to linger and mingle. And a look at the project schedule. We're in a period of schematic design. We expect to conclude schematic design this year, and then move into further development of design and permitting, which we hope to complete by the end of next year. We won't break ground on this project, in large part due to FIFA and these other projects kind of catching up to it, until 27, 28. And we expect that this is going to be a phased construction. So it's going to be constructed over a period of time because it's a big project that's going to be extensive. And then for context, we have the two other project schedules adjacent to it, just so you can see at the big picture level, the monorail station accessibility design and this solicitation for a new retail partner. We really intentionally want those designs to inform one another. And you'll see kind of where we have placeholders in our concept for those to catch up. And now I will hand off to Shannon.
Thanks, Julia. So just starting with a zoomed out view, Julia really mentioned some of the wonderful connections that all lead to Thomas Street. it's more central in the city and especially in outdoor pedestrian and healthy experiences than we might first think. So it's an interesting place to think about what a street is when it's not defined, which is not something completely novel to all of you, but when a street isn't defined by its car traffic or throughput, but it's defined as a pedestrian connection. It's defined by its the experience that it offers to people that is fairly novel in our city of being able to walk on a street and let go of your kid's hand and feel comfortable doing that. And then it also has a vital location against all these different outdoor experiences and connections that you've all probably been reviewing over the years that are, some of them are more aspirational and some of them are really happening, which is super exciting. So being part of this diverse network of outdoor experiences and just places to be safe outside on your feet as a human is super exciting. But there is this duality of it's a pedestrian connection and it's also a place. Because it is a place where incredibly heavy duty events happen. So that flexibility and how much flexibility can you have in the street that's also a great connection is one of the design themes that keeps coming up for us. So then we zoom in a little more and center of the center. And I know that phrase has been used before, but the number of things that are along this basically 2-block stretch of Thomas Street is incredible. Just for the architectural tourist or for someone coming to Seattle for the first time with their family and wanting to experience whether it's the skate park, Mopop, Space Needle, Chihuly, the Armory, and all the food options there, the beautiful mural amphitheater and the great shows there, the Fisher Rooftop and the Fisher Pavilion, the Children's Theater, Climate Pledge, and more. So this also, when you look at the outline of our scope, it starts to indicate that this is an ostensibly simple project. The pink text there says what our scope actually is. It's basically repaving and furnishing of a street. And so one of the intellectual exercises that we've had as a client and design team is how focused can we stay on beautifully refinishing this street and being able to conceive of it as a street that has continuity. And it's also a bit of a template, which I'll talk about later, but also still put in thought to all these adjacent things that aren't streets and aren't normal street edges. So part of the reason why the edge of our scope is so complicated is our thinking has to blur every linear foot we move into these different existing conditions. There's stuff in the street, there's stuff, you know, right out of the street, and the conditions are comically varied. And it's been very, you know, really interesting. How can we get continuity in and also set up some templates that can bring continuity to other parts of the campus if we make the right kit of parts and system for this flexible event street that's a great pedestrian connection, but also a place for events. So there's some, every street within Seattle Center is different, of course. There's lots of wonderful variety there, but this is part of a kindred couplet of streets. Second Avenue and Thomas have similarities, and they both are have really great connections to the adjacent neighborhood streets. They're aligned with them. You can walk all the way through the campus on them. And they tend to be the major events and festival streets. They do a lot of the work of hosting big trucks coming in with event stuff and equipment, lots of tents, and just lots of people. So they completely transform from hour to hour and season to season. So we are thinking about the similarity between these two streets as a start of potential increase in continuity at Seattle Center, which in the landscape can help it feel like a more tended and cared for space and also easier to navigate for people. And I was just going to mention the topography and drainage of the street is interesting to keep in mind when you see our subsequent design diagrams. So that there's a high point at the intersection there of 3rd and Thomas, and then the water generally sheds down laterally east or west. So we are looking at options to both slow the water a bit within the street treatment as much as we can. And also are anticipating that we'll be looking at larger facilities at the low point on either end of the street as the project moves forward. So we've been talking about that, and we have more brainstorming and work to do on that. But the primary drivers of the street design are the pedestrian and event functions. So I usually don't start with details when I walk people through a design, but in this case, that's actually how we started, and it's made for a really interesting project story. So I just thought I'd relay our work to date in the authentic order, starting with details. And the reason for that is that quietly for 15 years, there's been a block of 2nd Avenue that's been a prototype, a test renovation, a test upgrade to Seattle Center's streets. And it's called Theater Commons, but it's the block from Mercer to August Wilson Way. And we completed that in 2010, actually. So it's been sitting out there collecting feedback. We've been able to watch it. The facilities folks and events folks have been testing things out and watching it. We developed that stretch of pavement and the treatment of the street in collaboration with the events and facilities and programming folks at Seattle Center at that time to bake as many things into this flexible and ostensibly simple street treatment as we could, with a goal of it being replicable potentially throughout campus and something that would be iterated on and improved as we learn what works and doesn't work. So what does it look like? This is, here's a photo of it. So you can see in the foreground, in the background, you can see 2nd Avenue. We're looking south here. You can see the typical treatments of 2nd Avenue. In the foreground here, you can see there's herringbone, regionally sourced concrete pavers. These are a system that can be pervious if there happens to be places where we can put a little bit of gravel underneath and have that be pervious. That system works for that, or it can be mortar set. In this case, all of 2nd Avenue is mortar set because there's old streetcar tracks and stuff underneath there that are real close to the surface. There's no curves. Everything's flush for maximum flexibility of all sorts of things. Tents, wheels, carts, people in crowds that we don't want to trip. Getting the water, and having the possibility that the water can shed laterally from the crown of the street into the tree planting soil volumes on either side. You can see the 3-foot wide cast concrete bands that hold those pavers in on either side, but they're also that generous width, not only to have a real clear marking of simple edge when there's so much going on everywhere along the edges, but also to be wide enough that they serve as slab footings for benches. They also are wide enough that they can accommodate the really burly footings that Seattle Center needs for its light poles, its standard light poles, and other kinds of things. So everything's sized up a little bit so that it can be maybe backed into with a truck a time or two and still function. So thinking about all those kinds of things, this was all with input from the facilities folks. So if we look at that in plan view, this is our template for this project, and our scope really is take that prototype. There's some lessons we learned that will adjust it, and then apply it all the way down Thomas Street, which sounds simple, and we can make it happen. But this gives you a little bit more idea of this system of this street. So we've minimized the width visually to help it feel calmer and more intimate of the central portion of the street to 20 feet. That's still comfortable for 2 vehicles to go past each other. It's an ACTO kind of standard now. We have those 3-foot wide flush concrete bands in place of curves. And then the darker gray you see is the tree planting volume, which anywhere we can make it continuous for the soil, that's what this allows us to do. What we have on top of that tree, on top of that soil at the prototype, the 2010 prototype, is a lot of pervious aggregate concrete. And the maintenance methods for that haven't meshed well with Seattle Center's equipment and approaches. So we're currently looking at something else that can be where it's appropriate, that can be pervious to let the trees breathe, to let water slow down a little bit, grab a little bit of that water as it's rolling off the street surface, and be practical. The size of those side pieces in between the side strips, in between the trees, are also sized for 10 by 10 event tents with tolerance so that you can get two with a little bit of wiggle room or crooked installation. And that seems to have worked really well on the prototype street. And then of course we have stuff like power sources and things like that we don't see on this diagram, but tend to use those 3 foot wide strips. And I'm getting into this detail on the details because then when you see us looking at laying out this simple thing. Did I do that? Did I just? I'm gonna assume I did.
Apologies.
Oh. It sounded like.
I'm triple tasking. Excuse me.
It's okay. I'm just glad it wasn't me. That would have been 20 minutes. Okay, so taking that section per our scope and then taking that treatment and extending it across Thomas Street is really interesting. So these are simplifications of the process we went through to get to the alignment and the plan view layout you'll see today. The top one here is taking the exact profile of the Theater Commons prototype and stretching it all the way down Thomas Street. Because we're showing the whole scope here, it might be a little hard to see, but you can see we have concrete strips going through buildings. There's buildings that stick into the right of way on Thomas Street, or the historic right of way. And you can see the trees are all in different alignments, just because over time things have just kind of been piled up around each other. So then we thought, well, maybe we can narrow it. I mean, we could narrow it to a 16-foot lane and see if that works. The short answer on that is that doesn't work. There's too many places where they're so complex. So then the team looked at, well, what happens at intersections? Number one, we do need to think about that because we didn't have an intersection in the prototype at second. And there's also a lot of things that happen at intersections at events, during events. There's things that need to be set up there, people standing around that need to see where to go, there's signage. So there's also a need for a slightly larger intersection space at the intersections than the typical street section offers. On top of that, the team realized that if we shift alignment of the street to match current conditions at each intersection so that each block can have its own alignment within reason, we can use the intersections to do that. So that started to be really exciting, and it started to make the place a bit more interesting so that we're not imposing complete uniformity on everything. There's still this sort of variety of things that have evolved over time in terms of the layout and making each block work for that block's current conditions. But this didn't completely solve it yet. There was still some awkwardness around the Armory, and we really need to get it right at the Armory because of all the buildings on Seattle Center, one could make an argument that's the one that really everyone has a reason to go into, whether it's for restrooms or food while they're on campus. So we really needed to get that right. And I'll show you an enlargement of this later, we added one more shift in the alignment, and it's largely to be able to shoot through that gap, the fairly narrow gap between the end of the Chihuly facade and the part of the Armory on the east. And it's also to provide a proper amount of pedestrian and cafe seating space around the entry of the armory, which has been missing, as we all know, for years. So here's a illustrative-ish version of that plan as it sits now. So you can see the stretches of the prototype street, which I walked you through probably excruciating detail earlier. Then we have the intersections, which are a different style of pavement, a different texture. We aren't at the point where we know exactly what those will be yet. So because they weren't kind of predictated by the prototype. So we're always interested to hear your thoughts about things like that. And then we have the central special anomaly of the armory, which I'll walk you through as we go through this from end to end. So just some zoom in, some existing photos and some perspectives to help you visualize a bit more of how this is laying out. We're going to start at Fifth Avenue because, as Julia mentioned, this is where the majority of folks enter the campus. Right now, it feels like as a kind of a service alley. We're all used to it, but we need to be better hosts. And it's also, for many people, this really struck me when I heard this from Seattle Center. It's many people's first steps in Seattle or close to it. So super important and exciting. So here we can see as we're approaching this, and great shot of the monorail going overhead. We have a lot of wonderful, spectacular assets in view as we're getting close to this entry to Seattle Center. MoPOP, the Space Needle, and the monorail. It's just pretty amazing trio of world landmarks. And then here is the actual street that we're charged with repaving and looking at how to address this. One of the, there's multiple things that are a little disorienting and feel less than purposely welcoming here to visitors and the neighborhood. One is just that there's some confusion and hierarchy between, even with the red fire lane, those almost look like graphic attractants to me, but the Space Needle service drive is about equal in width and ability to where we want the public to really be drawn to walk. And of course, there's just material quality that it's real exciting to think about improving. And this gives you a sense of that in a CAD diagram in terms of scale. So we're wanting to bring and lure people into the Thomas Street alignment here. And they get a walk next to that beautiful facade of MoPOP and underneath the monorail, hopefully as a train goes by. So here's a modified version. We've narrowed the central lanes to be able to fit between, really to suit the existing space and the constraints. And we've suggested a bit of a extra welcome gesture or porch like overlay at the welcoming end of it on Fifth. This is also on a fair slope. We can say more precisely what it is in Q&A, and I'll let one of my team members answer. But it's in excess of where we would have cafe furnishings and expect a table and chair to be comfortable to sit on. So it's really about passage and welcoming. So here's that existing crossing and moment of deciding where to go. Here's a diagram. Again, we're in mid SD. So here's a diagram of what we're proposing, of having the first thing that you see or reaches out to you be the Thomas Street portion of this. And also suggesting a new treatment for the intersection. This could be paint. At the very minimum, it could be paint to signal that there's continuity between all the wonderful work that's happened on Thomas Street to the east, and hey, keep going. This is still a creative and welcoming public place. It could also potentially, we would need to do some coordination with agencies and have some conversations. But it seems like it would be well suited to be a scramble intersection and possibly to be tabled. Since it is a T intersection, there's the angle that's nearby within a pretty short distance. So it would be it's an interesting option to explore. So then you get to this stretch of Thomas Street, this block. We've nicknamed it Icon Plaza because it is the place on earth where you can stand between the monorail station, the MoPop, and the Space Needle. That's pretty amazing that you can stand in a triangular room between those three landmarks. And that's where a lot of people that we all run into when our office is by the market. So many people on the street are like, how do I get to the Space Needle? How do I get to the monorail station? And so here is where they've made it. And the first thing that we're looking at here is how to continue that welcome and that upgraded street surface that pedestrian street surface that they can be on. So here you can see now some of the things with, there's a wonderful vibrance that we've talked about as a client and design group, that there's an accessible, welcoming, carnival-like atmosphere. Yeah. That it's not intimidating and it's not expensive to get really fun things here and to walk up these colorful kiosks. Everyone wants to preserve that aspect of this, that it's for everyone and it does feel really festive and family friendly, but it could feel better organized and more clear about where you go. There's also a lot of blocked sight lines that ironically make it difficult to see the icons that we just talked about. So that's what we do in our homes over a while of accruing clutter. So here's the CAD representation of that. And if you zoom in a bit along the street, you can see a lot of different, this is not even showing all those kiosks and fences and things, but we see all the different curb shapes and things like that along the street that make it confusing. And so the first move is looking at putting this flush street treatment through there that I showed you earlier with the Theater Commons photo and drawings. This provides more flexible surfaces for the kiosks and for cafe seating and also events and tents during those times. The other thing to notice is that the street widens out here as much as we can, given some of the things that are pushing in there. But that's actually a really nice effect because if you're entering in through a little bit of a narrower passage and then you get to this level-ish stretch of the street and it widens out, it'll help encourage people to just say, okay, I've arrived. Now I can hang out. There's more space here. I can look around me and feel in an urban room. So with the edges to this, because the monorail, MoPop, and the Space Needle are all set pretty far back from the street, which is pretty provocative. But there's a lot of different conditions and things happening in there. We also have really important retail services and buildings that are within the space and some exciting and dynamic things that are happening with those and also with the space between the street and the monorail station. So it's important that you're just aware of some of these moving parts and Julia will help bring us up to speed on those factors.
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on the monorail station design because that's a separate project. But since you're all leaving after this presentation to go tour ST3, I just want to, ST3 sites, I just want to remind us that until we have the Ballard Lake extension near 2039, 2040, the monorail is a grade separated train that delivers people to Seattle Center for big events over the most congested part of our city. And it's really important. And it's been doing a really amazing job since the reopening of Climate Pledge Arena, actually kind of like crushing all the expectations. And so it's a heavy lifter for our events. This project is about making it more accessible, increasing the passenger throughput, which is really needed. adding some queuing space because we do have long lines of people coming and waiting for the monorail, but also making it visible because you can stand right in front of this train and not have any idea that there's a train from Thomas Street. And so all those things will come out to meet Thomas Street. And then on the next slide, talking a little bit about this retail RFP, request for proposals. Seattle Center is actively looking for an experienced partner to design, build, and operate a new retail offering or attraction on Thomas Street. This builds on a long tradition of Seattle Center really being a place that is entrepreneurial in spirit, kind of a social enterprise where we leverage city investments like what we're doing in Thomas Street with public-private partnerships to really amplify what we're able to perform. And we are hoping to attract a future partner that will collaborate with Seattle Center to integrate their idea for elevating the retail experience on Thomas Street with the design for Thomas Street as a whole. The goals of our RFP are to generate revenue for Seattle Center to support its mission and its public programs, to enhance the streetscape near the campus gateway, and to add energy and interest that really draws people in and keeps them at Seattle Center. And we're hoping to get some big ideas. We will be reviewing those proposals in the fall. And now you can
Great.
take it back.
So we just have 2 more blocks to walk you through to show you more of a snapshot of where we're at in exploring these designs. So the Armory block, it has been fun and interesting. Some goals for that are to make space or properly respond to the historic facade of the Armory, which is an interesting one for landscape. And this is a real hotspot for busker activity and just people kind of wanting to have space to stop. It feels like a stopping place, but there's not a lot of space and it's not very clear right now. And then definitely more spill out from the food and event hall in terms of cafe seating. That's another popular request from the folks in the Armory. So here's just a reminder of the existing condition. The building, it's that type of building that's a little hard for landscape architects in cities to make you comfortable right next to you because its warmth is higher up on the facade. And it's so heavy and chunky that you don't see into the openings easily. So it feels a little like a blank wall, and yet it's so important. It's filled with so much vibrance. So one thing that would help when we were looking at this is it would be nice if people had a chance to be a little farther away from the facade and look back at it. If you're a little farther away, you can see there's beautiful brick and big windows. And it is a welcoming and wonderful historic building if we're allowed to see it. So given that on this side of it that we're standing on in this photo, we're not forced to have our shoulders brushing up against it. We thought it would be good to encourage people to hang out a bit farther. And as you can see, the cafe furnishing right now with all that food and bev that's inside is relegated to this little, we've been calling it the gutter, but it's relegated to this little crowded place. And it works really, like people love being there because there's not that much outdoor seating in town in general, but we could have more of it. And so that is, here's, our first, just in a meeting, really quick sketch of what if those bands opened up that are against the building and there was something that felt like the same stuff that floated across the street. You could have people looking at each other across the space rather than, feeling like there's this one side of the space they can be in that is disproportionately small to the amount of open space if you think about Mural Amphitheater. So here's the CAD plan of the before, and you can see the cafe seating now that's really pushed up against the building. There's an older design that focused on, I think, more the visual symbol of the front door, trying to help people find the front door. And then we have mural. And then it is significant to note that the Chihuly Garden and Glass Museum has the spatial relationship it does of having, we have that passage on that part. And there's actually an opening door on that corner that we're interested in seeing if this landscape can help become a little more interactive and activating of the space. So this is taking these blocks of cafe seating pavement that we would see as having a relationship in their length and scale to that big chunk of brick that's on the facade. That they'd bring this feeling almost like that conceptually. We don't know what material these are going to be yet, but almost like that chunk of that big chunky brand of brick that's on the facade is floating across the space, and you can hang out on these chunks. And then you see the building as being a social device. And then we're also handling the changes in alignment that I talked about earlier in the diagrams. So more super sketchy sketches. This is the before situation, looking from the east side, looking west, and then doing things like removing, a lot of these things are pretty simple moves, but removing walls and barriers where we can, where it's possible, and getting a little more of that two-sided feeling space or three-sided feeling space with social edges, but lots of flexible space at the same time. So here's a section looking west, so you can get a sense of the proportion of the space. And then this would be the proposed condition. This section is more detailed than our result thinking is at this point, but it does give you a sense of scale and proportion, and the grading is accurate. So then the last block, maybe the simplest, this is the one we call the festival block. It's the other entry at Second by the Seattle Children's Theater. And here's an existing view looking west. And the CAD for that, you can see there's a lot of different conditions again with curbs and the treatment within the street. And this would simply unify it, do another one of those welcoming rug rollout tongues into what we also could see as being an enhanced intersection to really welcome people in and signify the entry into a pedestrian zone. So thank you. Happy to answer questions.
I was just,
Oh, sorry.
oh no, I was just looking to see, we did have a member of the public who was trying to, I was trying to let them in, they didn't have the correct link, and so we do have a member of the public that joined us.
Oh, great.
I'm assuming that there's no one else here that needed to make public comment. David.
Happily quiet in the back. Thank you.
Thank you. We were joined by Mark Ostro, a member of the public. Mark, did you wanted to make up to 2 minutes of public comment?
I said that he just left.
Well, he joined again, and then I think he left again. I may have begun. Why don't I don't have any comment. Given that, why don't we go ahead and start with Commissioner question, and I'll throw it to Kate to think of.
Sounds great. So thank you so much for this presentation. It's really interesting to hear about your process of going back and forth between sketch and then development, and really interesting focus on the issues that you're resolving within it. So thank you so much. Super interesting, and obviously a wonderful space and project to have the opportunity to spend time with here. So I'll be leading the discussion on this. And so we have identified some questions that will help guide the discussion. However, if there are other questions or themes that have come up for you, you can also cover that. So I think what we'll do is we'll do questions first, and then we'll switch to deliberations. So the first question is about the general theme of collective identity. So how effectively do the 4 character sectors work together to create a unified experience while maintaining distinct identities? Does the transition between sectors feel natural and supportive of the overall campus framework? So generally, does anybody have questions? And feel free to just speak up. We're not going to do round robin about the theme of collective identity.
Could you, maybe put up the 4-room
Sure.
segment? That might be a good place to start with the conversation.
Is this?
Oh, no, that's,
That's good.
yeah, that's,
Okay.
Jim, when we're all dark.
No, I took that out.
Maybe I can kick off with questions. I think we started this conversation saying that this was a pedestrian focus. And we've done great things like create an Armory Plaza. And then at either end, the entrances and the exits make a lot of sense as to making a welcoming place. I've always been flabbergasted that it says do not enter on Fifth Avenue, right? Like there's like 3 different do not enter signs on that. And I know it's for cars, but it, anyway, I'm wondering what the intersections are truly meant to be. And it almost seems like we're being deferential back to the cars again at these intersections because they are the old roadway intersections, and the Armory Plaza seems like more of an intersection for humans than a roadway. And I'm probably thinking about like the trash roadway, right? Just to the east of the Armory. That doesn't seem like an intersection for humans. That seems like an intersection for trash trucks, right? And
It's an opportunity.
it's an opportunity. And I guess I'm just trying to ask, what are we doing in those other opportunities? The Armory is a great example of a human intersection because they're going to go in and out of that. Are we walking past the Space Needle and the monorail without a plaza? Or is that an intersection for humans? Maybe that's just a discussion topic.
Is it a question to us?
It's kind of a question, like, what are we address the Armory as a human intersection.
Right.
Are there other human intersections that are also important, and how do we deal with them?
That's great.
Do you want to maybe go back to your slide that has all the intersection typology?
Sure.
Like, they seem to be very important nodes, and it's where your
Yeah.
streets are stepping,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't seem to be important human exit points.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're zeroing right in on conversations that are happening on a lot of projects right now where we, especially in North America, are talking about if we change the program of the street from what we're used to, like street equals car, and if we see the figure of a street
Yeah.
for a stretch, myself included, like, you know, it'll be like, okay, that's not a room, that's a arrow, a vector arrow
Yeah.
that cars use. And then something that looks not like that is, you know, the anomaly is for people on feet. And I think that's part of a really exciting thing for me in working on this project is that we're going to have a place in our city where we have streets that look like urban streets. This wouldn't be as revolutionary in some other parts of the world, more historic cities, but where the streets look like streets, but they're full of people.
Mhm.
And they're just space in between lots of different things where you can do whatever. Kids can play, there can be tents set up in the middle, they can be tents set up on the edge. And I'm not trying to evade your question, but how much we circle back and say, this needs, you know, this area needs to look different because it's so opposite of the vector line for the cars that we should make something special. that's the constant tension on this project. So I feel like you're getting right into that. Um, Part of this is, sorry, the grand juror of the, no, it's kind of distracting. Part of this
I don't
is,
get out much.
no,
apparently.
I don't either. None of us do anymore. Part of this is figuring out, can we, bring some continuity that we're secure about into Seattle Center, because there's so many special plazas and gardens and building, and what's the right balance? So I'm not saying, I'm not arguing or pushing back on you, but I'm saying that is the dialogue on the project.
I think because it was a question, because I don't know what the right answer is either, right? It's how do we lean into the intersections for humans?
Mm-hmm.
And which ones are they along Thomas? No idea.
Quick follow-up question related to that, and Kevin, I see your hand raised. In relationship, I'm wondering, has there been an analysis done on pedestrian numbers versus freight numbers in this corridor? Understanding that whatever you develop will ideally shift that and magnify it towards making it more of a room dynamic, but I'm just wondering if.
There's been some, and we had access to them on some on-call work around Seattle Center. And I probably should, we could follow up with more information on that, but I probably should clarify the intersections here are anticipated to deal with pedestrian crossings. So any place that there's an intersection, it's a historic legacy of when this was a dense neighborhood. I mean, before it was Seattle Center, it was part of the city, and now those intersections are vast majority pedestrian activity. So this is for people walking, and there are also service vehicles that occasionally use these same stretches of pavement.
Yeah, there is a lot of coordination every day of the year at Seattle Center about trying to get those trucks so that they are background and not in the, are not obstructing the pedestrian spaces. Stuff happening super early in the morning, at night, because the streets are intended to be for people, and the vehicles that are on the street are either like our, sort of small maintenance vehicles that are going around making sure things are clean and fixed, or I think mostly event loading in and loading out.
Kevin,
Thank you, Kate. So I have two related questions to Brian's question. The first, specifically at the intersections of Fifth and Second. And I'm not looking for a design solution answer, but how are you, or have you coordinated with SDOT on what, like you mentioned, the scramble intersection? That's obviously something
Right.
they would have to endorse, but just generally speaking, on design, how are you working?
At this
with them?
point, we have not
Okay.
on those scrambled, we've been talking to Seattle or to SDOT. I mean, we actually coordinate with SDOT all the time on things like they've done the Thomas Street redefined public plaza just across. We have regular meetings with them about all the plans around the area that touch Seattle Center, but on this concept, we are not there yet. We thought that this would be an opportunity to get, your feedback. Is this something that we should, that is a longer conversation.
Okay.
And we don't, it is sort of a little bit of scope bleed outside the scope of this project too. So it is an idea that I think we'd like to hear from you. Does that have legs? Is that something we should pursue?
I'll save that for comment. Pedestrian scramble, I'm in, but it's not my decision to make. It would have been at one time. But second related question is, as you know, Thomas is a really important street for pedestrians and bikes from South Lake Union to Bay Trail. So I guess my question is, I'm on a bike going westbound on Thomas, I get to Fifth. And this is maybe more of a design question, but what do I do at that point? Or more importantly, what am I going to be directed to do?
Yeah.
So that's really the ultimate question. And maybe you don't have an answer, but there's going to have to be an answer. So.
Yeah, I think that is it's an important question. It's one that has come up, and as you know, it came up during Climate Pledge, it has come up during a lot of planning discussions for Seattle Center for years. And Seattle Center, you know, welcomes bikes and multimodal transit. We always have, and we need to keep leaning into that in the future. The streets on the campus, the vacated streets on the campus they're not predictable as bike lanes, like they are regularly taken over with all manner of, you know, event and functional, and also shoulder to shoulder crowds at, you know, so it's not, and we have campus rules for safety. You know, Shannon mentioned the one anecdote that I really love, and I had also planned to mention, which is, you know, someone said during a planning process once, like, when is the moment on campus when I can let go of my child's hand and not worry about them getting, you know, in the way of something moving fast. And that's important to us. And so we have a set of campus rules that, and one of them is about speed limits on the campus. And we have a, you know, 10-mile-per-hour maximum speed limit for anything moving on campus. So it's not a predictable, particularly effective route for like a regular bike lane commuter kind of connection. But you know, as long as I've been at Seattle Center, which is about a decade, and there's many people who have had careers there for a longer time, but we have worked actively with SDOT on, you know, the plans for, now it's the NODO map, which was shown, North Downtown Mobility Action Plan, which was shown on a previous slide. You know, the improvements that got beefed up around the time that we were designing for mobility around Climate Pledge Arena, how to craft the bike lanes and what to tell people, I think is exactly your point.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I guess, because I didn't hear it addressed in the presentation, so I'm glad you're thinking about it. I'll probably have comments about it, so I didn't, but that was my point.
Thanks.
Yeah. Related to the safety point you made, I was just wondering, during the redevelopment, has the team thought about the experience people are going to have during the night? And is there like a lighting scope to this project or not? Because Seattle's not always this nice. It gets pretty, you know, dark pretty soon in winter. And if all those outside activities are not happening, it might feel with the closed, you know, site lines that we talked about, you mentioned, and the tree canopy and stuff, it can not feel that safe. So I was wondering, is that something you looked into, and is there a like scope?
Yes, I want to tackle that one. Yeah.
There's a lighting scope, and it's a real passion of Seattle Center to have the campus feel not only safe, but vibrant and attracting of lots of diverse activity at night. So we have held back from getting into lighting detail yet because we've been working on the big bone structure, or trying to discipline ourselves to do that, especially because there's been some of these moving parts of these adjacent projects that we've wanted to interface with a bit. But we're excited to get into that, and we welcome comments and guidance on that, and from your perspective in the comments.
So we have in previous, like at around 20, I want to say 2021 or 2, we engaged Dark Light Design to do like a full pedestrian lighting sort of plan and guidance for the campus, and took into account, you know, how our light fixtures are spaced and where there's opportunities for placemaking and where there are lights on the facades of buildings, and all of those things are contributing to the lit environment at night. And one of the sort of next steps following that plan was there were some opportunities where there could be enhanced like sort of lighting that could be more fun, you know, than just the pedestrian poles. But the lighting designer said, well, you really need a landscape or an urban design consultant to sort of take this on. So this is our opportunity to really kind of marry those two together after the concept for the streetscape is done.
I think we have about a half hour left, and we still have a few more sections. So I'd like to propose that we merge our questions and comments, and because instead of doubling back, since it seems like people are developing their feedback alongside their questions. So if you had any suggestions you'd like to make alongside your questions for anybody in this section about collective identity. I know there was a question about desire for scrambled intersection. Kevin, you mentioned you might have some comments, so just like to raise that right now.
Sure, thank you. I'm happy. So I think my only comments at this point are and this is like we frequently make recommendations about just making sure there's good coordination between departments. So I think given where SDOT has been on Thomas, one comment recommendation is just, it's really obviously really important to work closely with them, particularly at the two ends. And it's your intent to do that. And I think we should just make that part.
Yeah.
Secondly, I think on bikes, again, I'm not advocating for allowing bikes to blast through this section for all the reasons you mentioned, Julia. But the reality is this is part of a bigger, highly used corridor. So I think it's really important ultimately to have very clear either wayfinding signage to tell people this is the bike route, go via whatever. Or I think it's fine to say bicyclists dismount and walk through this. I mean, people at Fremont and Ballard Sunday Market do that every Sunday. I mean, I'm down there all the time. So I think it's completely fair to say for this 3-block segment, get off your bike and walk it through. But I just think if you're not explicit with people about what to do, then they'll start riding through it, and you don't want that. Some people will do that anyway. So I think that
We know.
they do it all the time now. But
Yeah.
I guess that's part of one of my comments is let's just be really clear with people about what you want them to do with SDOT's blessing. That was the only comments to that.
Shireen, any comments about the lighting question or suggestions?
I think it would be nice to see some maybe accessibility and lighting diagrams next time we talk about that to be able to understand that whole experience.
Great. And maybe to add on to it, lighting diagrams that magnify from kind of an urban planning or like social space activation beyond just necessity of darkness. Great.
Sorry,
Brian.
Kevin did touch on signage. I know there's a campus-wide clarity of signage happening. This is a great opportunity to sort of bring that to bear. Especially as it is your spine, right? With the two main entrances and the monorail dropping people off in the middle of it. Signs are.
So signage plan for bike, pedestrian and monorail.
Yeah.
Just signage plan.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Yeah.
a great point, Brian. And I think, Julie, your point about the monorail, when Eastlink does finally connect across the lake, the monorail is going to be doing more heavy lifting, like a lot more than it is now. So that's, that whole monorail project is huge. And I think this is a great opportunity to kind of think about all of it together, honestly. So just, I think signage.
Great. So let's move to gateway treatment. Some of these comments I'm sure will also intersect. No pun intended, sorry.
I'll let you go, Kate.
sorry, Phoebe.
It's okay. I just wanted to, because I was holding it from before about the intersection conversation, and so just thought I'd make a comment there. I do think it was an interesting point that Brian brought up, and and then the kind of conversation about how really we're trying to transform this, what we're calling a street for people. And so I think what I'm kind of, and obviously we'll develop with the plan, but is the materiality and the understanding of those intersections. And it feels that they are calling attention to themselves, perhaps without making them, they're not feeling like they're resolved in terms of a transition point. Like they serve as a transition point for alignment, which is really smart. But it doesn't necessarily feel like how in which those, we're not getting a sense of how they come together yet. So I'd like to just continue to see, as the design progresses, what those intersections really mean, because I don't think they're actually just I don't think it's a car-based approach. I do think it is for people. It is still where everybody is walking. But in terms of are those meeting nodes, how do those kind of start to reveal themselves? So that was my comment on intersections. And then just real quickly, well, no, I'll save the other one about Armory later.
Thanks. Thanks, Phoebe. So yeah, that you're kind of queuing us up for the topics about gateway treatment with wanting to have more defined sense of what is happening with the treatment of those intersections. And we've heard room, we've heard welcoming rug, we've heard porch, plaza. So it's kind of lots of exciting sounding things that I want to walk through and spend time in. And I was wondering, you mentioned the herringbone pattern. Is that going to be the treatment through this entire corridor? Or, because you were mentioning you had set the tone with this earlier Theater Commons template.
So as of now, that's what we're showing. It's tested, it actually has advantages with accommodation of heavy trucks. So occasionally for a huge event, big trucks come in with stages and all that kind of thing. And it's relatively rare, but it can, and I've seen it happen, it can ruin-ish unit pavers that aren't designed for it. So the herringbone pattern can even be sandset, and it'll hold up to that, and it'll hold up to all the heavy maneuvers and turning that happen on these streets because they're parking and they're dropping stuff off and things. So that's the rationale behind the herringbone and why, and the fact that it's been out there for 15 years. We don't want to squander that information. So we're trying to discipline ourselves to stick with it. And it also brings it doesn't look like retail or hotel, like commercial concrete paving. We like that it has a bit more urban historic connotation in terms of a street treatment than other kinds of concrete unit pavers do.
Could we go to another plan view where we see our living rooms all together?
The width,
Plaza, just the different.
this whole street.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't have one that doesn't have, I mean, I have one that doesn't have the labels on it.
This is fine.
Okay.
So I guess kind of connecting to what Phoebe was talking about, with this, and also in relationship to the scrambled intersection question, I also am excited about that. There's lots of great opportunities, as you know, for artwork as a component to that. Thermoplastic is a wonderful material to consider, more durable than paint, especially if it's primarily pedestrian activity. SDOT, of course, has great precedent working with thermoplastic and artists. So I'm just wondering since the herringbone sounds like a great choice that you've already tested, that has a really strong graphic presence. So then we also have these potential like mixing zones that you would demarcate as well. So I'm wondering for color continuity, how to introduce that feeling, especially in the Armory where you want to pull people back and have the cafe and things like that. Will these intersections and gateways be demarcated graphically? What will the color palette be? Is there a way to incorporate artists somehow in that process? But on the other side, keeping a sense of continuity as you're moving through. So if there is a color scheme, a color palette, you start to develop an understanding like, oh, here's one living room, here's another living room, here's another living room. Does that question, or does that suggestion make sense in terms of, for example, if you have a scrambled intersection, the color cues of that, would that extend to then the color cues you use in the cafe area by the Armory? Like, how are we defining these spaces in terms of the color palette? I'd like to, in the next step. understand a little more about
Yeah.
that or?
I'd love to have you at the table for a couple hours to talk about that. I mean, it does make sense what you're asking, and we have continuity elements. And then there's opportunities for contrast
Yeah.
to that, contrast to the herringbone that tells us this is a high quality urban street and you can walk on it, which is important to have that neutral, traditional, rich connective tissue. The intersections are not defined yet in terms of materiality, technique. We also have to think about timeline and budget and potential collaboration opportunities. So everything you're saying is important for us to consider. In terms of color schemes, we haven't gotten as far as that. I'd bring up that we may potentially have, you know, I always like to think of things as systems that will be replicated, but there may be other intersections that aren't part of Thomas Street in the future around the perimeter of Seattle Center, because there's many places where the neighborhood enters Seattle Center via a crossing over a major boulevard, whether it's Fifth or Mercer or Broad. So thinking about if we coordinate really tightly with Thomas Street, we want to also be thinking whatever we do might want to, whether it's iterating in complete variety everywhere or some other kind of system for other exterior thresholds into Seattle Center, we need to be thinking about all those applications.
Could I offer one thought too on that? Like when we come to the intersection, like, so one of the things that we will definitely be removing when we redo this is some probably 90s era, like little art inlays and things that were designed into that plaza around the Armory, which like, they don't age very well.
Yeah.
And, I think it's always really tempting to, you know, to add that, like, because there will be something that will feel great right now, that will look so much better than what that looks like today. And we layer on unique identities with events, with art, with, we have like a temporary art program that rolls out every year that's in coordination with the Office of Arts and Culture, where people who are learning how to be public artists do installations across Seattle Center. So the environment does constantly change. And so having a canvas that is quieter, but can still signal this is a place to gather. I think that is that is going to be the art of figuring out these intersections.
Yeah, I guess maybe just to add a couple thoughts to that, I think, I really love the diagram of just the second and Thomas, that first diagram was so strong. And just the sentiment of like, we're just trying to make a really great, hardworking, beautiful street, And then I think kind of highlighting those nodes maybe takes away from that a little bit. Like, I don't know that we really need to say that this is a special place because it's an intersection. It's already an intersection, So that's sort of like a occupancy diagram in a way that I don't think we necessarily have to market with a change in materials. So I guess I would advocate studying, maybe taking out some of those nodes. Like, I think the actual nodes at the Armory and the Gateway are really important.
Yeah.
But I don't know that we need to mark every intersection just because it's an intersection. And I think there could be something really beautiful about just having that brick extend all the way down the street, and hopefully in the future Second gets that as well all the way through, right? And then I kind of fulfill that vision of there's this really strong pedestrian superhighway through it, or whatever. But yeah, I guess I think I'd be interested in seeing a study of that too, but maybe just doing less with it or letting it spill out instead of saying like this is a node, but maybe that brick like bulges out, or I don't know, maybe there are other ways to think about it, like the street expands.
I mean, the internal intersections don't even really need to be intersections.
Right.
In some ways, right? It's just they're just people are flowing through kind of.
Yeah.
I've been more focused on the external, thinking about more the external.
Maybe in relationship to this, instead of, because intersection is like car focused language even with this. So it's maybe instead thinking about like massing of social activity, like where people want to accumulate and where they want to flow. And that dictates where you concentrate living room spaces.
Yeah, I do want to make one clarifying. if called the intersections living rooms, I confused people when I did that. So I may have said something like that, but I think that may have driven some of your confusion. And I wanted to clarify that if I said that, I didn't intend to. Our ironic ideas, or the irony of our ideas with the intersections that I think you're bringing up that's really helpful, is that we wanted to quiet them down a bit because they were getting very fussy with all the changes in alignments. And we wanted to take away the language of the radius corners that we have in a vehicular intersection, because there's no need for lanes or curbs in these intersections because they're flush pedestrian surfaces. So we leverage the fact that these can just be neutral surfaces that absorb these alignment changes, and they're simple instead of feeling like your eyes being guided to, like, pick a lane to go around a corner. But you're bringing up some really great points about the different ways that people can interpret something that looks like a room or an emphasis, rather than, the emphasis versus simplifying and those conflicting messages that they send. So this is really helpful to hear everybody's
Yeah, I think like,
reactions.
like even just those two, the strong kind of 3 foot wide concrete stripes, right? Like I really like staggering the road. I think that all works great. I think it's good to not try to force it into alignment, but kind of like how those stripes end and how they pick up again. Like, I don't think they should just end and then pick up again, right? There should be like something that happens there, but I think it's just like it's obviously you guys will solve it. You're, awesome designers, but like, it could be like something about like how the concrete and the brick continue through that field, right? Rather than creating another thing potentially. I don't know.
Maybe the things that give the intersection their distinction is that people want to sit there and watch people go by, and that's so entertaining. That activates it just by the fact that you're sitting there and you're seeing people move through it. Maybe that's enough.
Ray, I saw that you had raised your hand.
Oh, yeah, it's gateway relevant, but hopefully, Judge, I noticed in the existing conditions, there are bollards, security bollards on the eastern end. And so is it actually within your scope to think about bollards less for protecting pedestrians from vehicles and more about building security questions? Is that, is that going to come up? Is it in the scope?
Interesting.
We all hope that it isn't, because that the world is safe. But is that, are we going to see bollards in these designs ultimately?
It's
a separate project, actually. We're working on it for the World Cup events.
Sure.
So it's a requirement by FIFA to implement security, and that's part of it.
So in the end, within the scope, within the spatial territory of this scope, there will be bollards. Probably. We don't know exactly where or how. That's really under the separate project.
Yeah, it's in the very beginning stages, but the design criteria have been established, so we understand what kind of bollards are needed. So and it's another one of those projects that sort of inform back and forth.
Sure.
Where should they be exactly? It's definitely a coordination effort.
Since we have 15 minutes, I'm going to jump into, we still have a couple more areas that people may or may not have comment on or have already touched on it. We have questions about pedestrian circulation, which maybe connects to what you were asking about, Ray. Does anybody else have any questions or comments regarding pedestrian circulation in this proposed preliminary plan?
I have a question, but I don't think it fits that.
The last area is also about, we have adaptability, so questions about stormwater management. And then lastly, how does this project connect to kind of the broader vision of this being a historic campus while accommodating contemporary accessibility and operational requirements?
Maybe that fits my question. Can you go to the overall plan with the strong second and Thomas lines? I think we gave ourselves a precedent of the commons. Are there other precedents that are important to Seattle Center that we should be incorporating? Like, are there other thoroughfares that are working well, working not well, that we should learn from? Because this seems to be modeling a small section of the commons now onto Thomas, but there are lots of other pathways and streets and other precedents that are there also. So are we setting a new global precedent, or everything in Seattle Center should now follow this model? And I guess we've reviewed Memorial Stadium, and there are going to be big edits to Harrison. Certainly, I'm blanking on what's just to the east of the fountain.
Third Avenue.
Third is being redeveloped and is going to get a new look. So how do we make all of them sort of play well together? Because I think choosing one precedent is great, but we have probably 5 or 6 precedents. I think in front of Climate Pledge is a very strong, very new, very active precedent.
And most of those are like climate pledges. I think it's just all concrete, right? For the most part. And
It's
most
not
of-
on the pathways though.
Yeah.
What you're, yeah,
It's like a plaza in front of,
Yeah.
that is pretty concrete-y, but then along the
Most of the rest of it's just asphalt, right?
Yeah, no, I think that does help.
Is that okay that I switched it to the?
Oh,
yeah, I think the west side of the fountain is a colonnade of trees. It's a pretty nice walkway.
It's the asphalt with the rolled asphalt curbs.
Sure, but it is a language that we're using in Seattle Center that we just made.
I think it's rooted in use. And, what we are trying for Thomas Street is a festival street.
Yep.
It needs to be a hardworking street that has many different uses. So it's different from a plaza around Climate Pledge Arena, for instance. I think that's, I would say whenever we have a festival street, where those activities take place, we have the template, and that's the Theater Commons template.
So this template is going to go into festival streets?
Yes.
Because I know Memorial is a target of the festival. Like the big acts will be potentially in the stadium, right? And certainly around the fountain.
Yeah, there's a slightly
I don't
different,
remember that as.
Theater Commons, I think at one point was intended to go all the way the more length of Second Avenue, and then we had to scale it back, and we kept it to the node that it is. So, a lot of the history is also rooted in funding, and we have the ability to finish the project. But I think that these 2 streets shown in yellow are definitely candidates for this treatment. Harrison Street, you're dead on that it has a different treatment associated with Memorial Stadium. It's also going to be an opportunity, for Seattle Center, what happens on the campus in response to the transformation that is Memorial Stadium and what happens there. But Harrison Street doesn't go all the way through the campus in the same way. You kind of ends up, and especially since Climate Pledge's entrance shifted from Harrison and Second to Thomas and Second, or Thomas and the building. It is Harrison Street is a different, it kind of merits a different look, and it could end up being something like this, but I think we have more time to figure that out.
I just want to bring up, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't think you're saying that they're making the wrong choice, but just that you're curious, did they look at other options? And why did you select this one over, the these others. And I think that you're doing a really good job of explaining why. And I think,
Yeah.
you know, if I think you're asking like, are there others that you might want to look at? Not that those would necessarily be better. This might, you know, very well be the right choice.
Well, and it's probably more of a comment to the owner than to the design team for Thomas project, right? Like, I think Thomas project seems to be choosing well, right? Like, of all the things, what is the thing that we want to replicate? The Commons is a great one to choose. Are there lessons out there that Thomas could benefit from the other typologies and the other choices that we've made across Seattle Center? And then probably a side conversation after the meeting is we're going to dig up those black dash lines here in the next year for Memorial Stadium. How should they play in with Thomas Second Ave? All these other new projects that we've just put in. I think
Yeah,
that,
no, I'm not gonna respond. I'm.
No,
saying-
Julia,
Because that is,
that's not this discussion.
right,
but
it is next and
But I think-
totally agree. with
I
you.
think
Yeah.
that's as you are placemaking the campus,
Mhm.
there are hierarchies, and orange arrows could be one thing and black dash lines could be another thing.
Yeah, I mean,
But let's aim there.
yeah, I don't feel like I've ever seen this kind of diagram of the center. Just personally, I don't know, maybe it's been around, but I feel like this is a really great diagram and a really, nice way of thinking about it. Like the figures in the center are so strong on their own that sometimes it's hard to like understand the circulation logic between those things. This is like a really awesome one. So, I guess I'd advocate for, moving in this direction, I guess, with this project and future projects, because it seems like a really great organizing principle.
Yeah, and it's something we do not see with the Memorial Stadium, right? Like
Right.
there was not a clear, this is what we are doing in relation to the whole campus. And I think that was primarily what we were
Right.
asking was like,
Well, Memorial Stadium's kind of making two legs of that black thing, so that
It was
is
a-
what it's gonna be now, right?
it was a pretty
So,
significant
Yeah.
move, right? And we kept asking, what are you relating to?
Well, I think it speaks to the fact that, as you were saying, it's a big campus, there's lots of piece by piece projects. And so by precedent, then you have to choose which ones are setting the tone that you want to extend and what needs to be adapted. And so this is providing a great opportunity to literally pave the way for that process.
You're on fire with puns.
I know. Phoebe, I remember you had one more comment that you wanted to make, or has it already been addressed?
It's been addressed. It was, I think we discussed, it was just about kind of further elaboration and understanding the true important places, including like the Armory Plaza. And I think right now, I think this was already said, but just I think it needs further study to kind of quiet that down, because there's a lot of things coming, probably too many juxtapositions there, I feel like. And so it's kind of losing the energy of what that space could be. But I love that it comes across the street and amplifies that space and kind of gives that a greater moment. So that was the only other piece about Armory. And then I had a question about the gateway pieces, which Ray has already been asking about the bollards and kind of how that's perceived at the Fifth Avenue edge. So
I think it's important on this diagram that those intersections that we were showing in the other diagram aren't even part of this, right? Like the little intersections are not on this diagram, and that is strongly for a reason, right? Like this is what your campus is doing. And I like Zubin's comment about maybe this diagram should be stronger in how people are interacting with those minor intersections.
Kevin?
Kate, I just have one quick comment. This doesn't have to be part of recommendation, but just I can't get the scramble intersection out of my brain. So what I would strongly urge you to do and urge us not to do is go, believe it or not, to downtown Bellevue. And look at 108th
Tell me more.
and the transit center, because there's a ped scramble intersection right there where the Bellevue Transit Center is on the east side and the 6th Avenue ped corridor is on the other side. And that scramble intersection really tells people you're going from one zone to another. And you're entering a fully pedestrian zone when you go west.
Yeah.
And it works really well. And and I think it would be a way of really demarcating that east gateway, like you are now entering a different place. And so I don't want to make a specific design recommendation, but it's an area that's worth looking.
All right.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. And with 4 minutes left to go, we would like to thank the project team for your presentation of the concept design for Thomas Street improvements. Overall, the commission really appreciates your focus on this really being a pedestrian-focused effort. As you were mentioning, there's lots of smaller precedents and templates that you're now extending into a broader vision for this area that we really appreciate your focus on that. And we would like to approve the concept design for Thomas Street improvement. I didn't hear any conditions to this. We do have some recommendations. I will read out what I heard from you all and we can modify as we go. Number 1, to work with SDOT to coordinate street plans as needed, including opportunities for a scrambled intersection. Number 2, to define the campus signage plan for this site, how bike, pedestrian, and monorail wayfinding interacts. Number 3, to consider a lighting plan in relationship to social activation of this site. Number 4, to define the materiality of this thoroughfare and in relationship to color palette. Number 5, to define areas of social emphasis versus areas to quiet and streamline. Zubin, does that?
I think so, or yeah, I don't know what else you have written down, but maybe just something about how this project relates to this diagram or to other things in the
The
center.
last one is consider how other street networks relate to the proposed project. Is there another way to word that?
Hierarchy of the streets on the.
Consider street hierarchies relate to the proposed?
We reconsider the whether or not all the intersections are important, or if they're taking away from like the whole.
The
There's
hierarchy.
editing out of sections.
Okay, so how about define hierarchy of,
Pedestrian flow. Done.
all right,
It's not necessarily intersections, it's just
Yeah.
where people are going and coming and.
so maybe those two can be combined. Was there a question about existing? Okay, define hierarchy of pedestrian flow.
Sort of as it relates to the street, but also the campus.
Mhm. Street and campus plan.
And your attractions, right? Like we're really concentrating on the Armory as a hub. Great, right? Like that's because that's all the people are going in and out of the Armory.
Mhm.
It's a great example.
So define hierarchy of pedestrian flow as it relates to street and campus plan. Which includes the attractions.
Yeah.
Is there anything that people feel like it's missing in these recommendations or needs adjusting? Great, so with that, I would like to initiate a vote for the approval of the concept design for Thomas Street improvements with the recommendations I just read out.
Aye.
Yes.
Yes, vote to approve.
Yes.
Love it. Yes.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yes, great project. Vote to approve with recommendations. Thank you. Phoebe?
Yes, vote to approve.
Great. So thank you all for your really thoughtful and detailed presentation. Yes, Phoebe?
So
I'm
now that
sorry,
we're on
Wendy.
the action, I just have a quick question. So in our prep meeting, there was a little bit more emphasis on the stormwater and the potential infrastructure of that. And so I'm curious if you're moving forward with that and where you're at with it, because I personally find that really fascinating, how you would integrate that into the green infrastructure into this and how it could be a way to not only make this street more adaptable as climate changes, but also as a way to potentially do some of the work of what Zubin was talking about, like how do you find something that's gonna kind of occur at those intersections that can create kind of a joint, something special that happens there that indicates that there's a shift happening. So I don't know, what you're thinking about in terms of that, but you didn't talk about it much, so I'm not sure if you're still pushing forward.
Because we're still working.
We wanted to be able to bring some more, we're looking at everything right now with stormwater, and it was taking frankly just too much time when we were going through we barely hit the mark. So that was something we decided to come back to you with. It's a great comment. The street is meant to be curbless so that it's able to absorb or at least slow down water, provide it with a little more surface area. We need to work with Mayfly to look at block for block where we can actually do that, so we don't make any false, like, we'd like to do this, but maybe there's, we're not able to do that everywhere. And that will influence how many other types of stormwater features that we might have. But I will say the clients are very enthusiastic about leveraging the fact that they have control over more of this little watershed than is normally the case for a property owner. So there's a lot of support for doing this right and really handling the water well in this project.
Who's Mayfly?
Oh,
Is there
sorry,
civil?
Mayfly is a civil engineering
Okay.
firm. We've worked with them on UW Foster Hall on those rainwater gardens and some other things. They're really great.
Thank you. Your work.